What's up everyone, it's Justin here, and today I've got a comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus and the LG G6. So it's a battle of the flagship from the Korean phone manufacturers, and these phones are similar in many ways but also different in a number of ways that from my uses have brought pretty different experiences. So in this video I'm going to try to explain the differences in the specs, the hardware, and just the overall feeling of using each phone. I'm also going to be giving away an LG G6, so all you have to do is subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video if you're excited for that and would like to be notified when that video comes up. Also, after you watch this video, please leave a comment down below as to which phone you prefer and why, as I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, but there's a lot to cover, and let's go ahead and get started with the hardware. So on the inside, the Samsung Galaxy S8 and S8 Plus uses a Snapdragon 835 processor, which is an octa-core structure that has an Adreno 540 GPU with 4 gigs of RAM and comes in 64 gigs of storage. The LG G6 has a Snapdragon 821 processor with an Adreno 530 GPU and comes in a 32 gig storage for the North American model and 64 offered in Korea and other Asian countries. Both phones also have a ton of glass. The Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus has glass front and back with Gorilla Glass on both sides with aluminum edges and a curved design. The phone comes in at 8.1mm thick, whereas the LG G6 is 7.9mm but feels like a thicker phone because the edges aren't as tapered as they are on the Samsung. If you've had an iPhone 5 before, I would say that the feeling of the LG G6 is pretty familiar. You will also find a glass front and back with Gorilla Glass 3 on the front and Gorilla Glass 5 on the back. Not really sure why they went with two different types of glass, but it is what it is. Nevertheless, the phones are pretty easy to scratch, especially if you go with the black model of the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus or the LG G6. So I definitely suggest getting a debrand skin as I've done here, and I think it looks pretty awesome on these phones, so I left a link in the description section below if that's something that you would like to check out. Both phones also have USB Type-C ports for syncing and charging, and also headphone jacks, but on the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus, it's located on the bottom where the LG G6 has the headphone jack on the top. Both phones have a great fingerprint sensor located on the back, where on the LG G6 it is combined with a sleep and power button and is located perfectly in the middle for your index finger. The Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus has it next to the camera on the right side, which makes it especially hard if you're using a phone on your opposite hand, and also very easy to smudge the camera, so I'm not sure why they didn't put it somewhere else. Performance-wise though, both of them are very fast and responsive and work very well, and on the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus you also have the option to use the iris scanner, which is something that works relatively well, but not something that I personally use. It's without a doubt that the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus is the better phone to look at. It is just beautiful and almost a work of art, especially with the black model that I have. With that being said, the LG G6 is still a very beautiful phone, and I would almost argue that it's more utilitarian, feeling like a normal phone, as opposed to a work of art like the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus, which I've been very afraid to scratch. Moving on to the display, the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus has a Super AMOLED 16 million color 6.2-inch display with an 84% screen-to-body ratio. This has a resolution of 2960 by 1440, which is the same resolution as the one on the smaller S8, and the larger model has a PPI of 529 and is around 18:9 in terms of the screen aspect ratio. The LG G6 on the other hand has a 16 million color IPS display that is 5.7 inches with a 79% screen-to-body ratio and is offered in one size only. The aspect ratio is also the longer 18:9 and has a 2880 by 1440 resolution with a 564 PPI. From playing the same thing on both screens, Samsung has been said to have the best smartphone screen ever. AMOLED is really unbeatable when it comes to the saturation, the vibrance, and just overall experience of the screen, but I will say that the LG G6 has one of the most accurate displays that I have ever seen. When comparing it side by side with my iPhone 7, which leans towards a warmer tone, and the Samsung Galaxy S8s that have a cooler tone, the LG G6 falls right in the middle. Both phones do have some form of color correction settings that allow you to adjust the temperature to a degree for your liking. At this PPI though, both screens are sharp, vibrant, and bring a very nice experience, but I think for those who enjoy a saturated look, you really can't go wrong with the Super AMOLED. From my experience, there have been no issues whatsoever when it came to scaling for the larger screen size on all of the major apps that I use, and many apps have actually already been optimized to fit the screen size through updates. You can have two apps open as a square on top of another, and you're able to scale the size of a particular window as well if you would like it to take up more space. What I liked about this is that in the past, multitasking might have been crammed on a screen, but in this situation, it works very well and is something that I enjoyed on the LG G6 and the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. Another thing worth noting is that the Samsung Galaxy S8 and S8 Plus both have a curved screen design like we saw on the Note 7. Previously, Samsung had released a flat and a curved model such as the Samsung Galaxy S7 and S7 Edge, but this year you don't really have an option for that. So if you're not a fan of the curved display at all, which sometimes makes it a little bit hard for typing, then the LG G6 is going to be the clear option here. The Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus also has one of the brightest displays I've ever seen on a smartphone at over 1000 nits, and there's actually a red zone or a warning that lets you know when you've crossed that brightness, just to let you know that you might hurt your eyes if you're using that. A scenario that I think this would become useful is if you're outdoors in a bright sunny day and you're not able to see your screen, the brighter setting will definitely come in handy. As for software, both phones arrived with Android Nougat 7.0. Of course, they come with their respective skins, with Samsung having TouchWiz and LG's having its UX, and both have definitely come a long way in terms of usability and enjoyability, as I've used Samsung phones since the Samsung Galaxy S4 and have had the LG G2, G3, G4, G5, and now the G6. I will tell you that the overall experience I found was smoother on Samsung's TouchWiz. It's still not my favorite skin, and I would definitely prefer to just have stock Android, as the Google Pixel is like my favorite Android phone, but it's improved a lot, and you really have to give it to Samsung and LG for that. They both still have their standard apps installed, but the settings menus are well sorted, the notification trays work well, but I think it really comes down to personal preference as to deciding which skin is better for you, and at the end of the day, Android is very customizable, so you can just install a launcher on there and have your own experience, but for the sake of the comparison, it's only fair if I compare the stock software. Of course, with the flagship specs, both phones were very reliable. The LG has already had one update, and I haven't had an update on my Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus yet. For my uses, I noticed minor stutters a couple times with the LG G6, but the Samsung has been very reliable based on my 1 week of use with both phones, and they are both Canadian unlocked models. When it comes to the camera, Samsung has been the top 3 for quite a few years now. The Samsung Galaxy S6 had a great camera, the S7 had a good camera, and now the S8, which hasn't seen many changes to last year's S7 and Note 7. But on the back, you have a single 12 megapixel f1.7 26mm field of view camera that is capable of recording 4K video at 30 frames per second and Full HD at 60 frames per second with optical image stabilization. On the front, you have an 8 megapixel f1.7 camera with the ability to shoot 2K video at 30 frames per second. LG, on the other hand, has brought back the dual camera setup that we first saw on the LG G6 and the V20, with dual 13 megapixel shooters with an f1.8 aperture consisting of a standard lens and also a wide angle 125 degree f2.0 camera. It also has optical image stabilization with a 4K 30 frames per second capability of recording video and 1080p at 60 frames per second. On the front, you have a 5 megapixel f2.2 camera that can shoot 1080p full HD. So because camera tests are rather subjective, I decided I'm going to just stay out of this in terms of my opinion. I trust that you guys have a good eye for design, and I'm going to put side-by-side images of photos taken in the exact same spot of both phones using the auto mode, and I would like you guys to take a close look yourself and decide which one you prefer in terms of the out-of-camera color, the sharpness, the balance, the exposure, and just everything in general, and make a judgment for yourself as to which one you prefer. As for battery life, I was actually pretty surprised with the results. The Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus has a 3500 mAh battery, while the LG G6 has a 3300 mAh battery. The S8 has a higher end processor and also a larger screen to power, so I would have expected that to take up more power than the LG G6. I was typically able to get through an entire day no problem, while on the LG G6 I was running out of battery by about 6 to 7 p.m, so that was a little bit surprising. When it comes to charging though, the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus has wireless charging as well as Quick Charge 2.0, while the LG G6 also has wireless charging on the North American model and Quick Charge 3.0. At the end of the day though, from the iPhone comparison, it was clear to determine that it was all about efficiency when it comes to the battery instead of the size. Even though both phones have the latest version of Android, I believe that the skin is a factor when it comes to the battery life on the LG G6 performing poorer than expected based on my experiences. Both phones actually also have settings that allow you to conserve the power of your phone by restraining the CPU and GPU to a point where you don't exactly need to use all of it, but it will maximize the battery life and efficiency. Despite all of the futuristic breakthroughs in these two phones, the audio is a category that haven't seen any major breakthroughs. With Apple having a reputation of being stubborn, they even integrated stereo speakers in their latest generation iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, but on the LG G6 and the Samsung Galaxy S8s, you're going to find a single bottom firing speaker. The Samsung Galaxy S8s though do include a $100 pair of AKG earbuds, but it does come in at a higher price, so you're technically paying for it. But you also have Bluetooth 5.0 on the S8, which allows you to connect up to 2 devices, for example. I found the speaker on the Samsung Galaxy S8 to be loud but not very clear, while the one on the LG G6 is not as loud but sounds better in my opinion, so here's just a quick test. So the last thing I like to include in these comparisons is the benchmarks. Even though benchmarks are not what you should be focusing on when deciding which phone to buy, I normally include them in the end just for those who are wondering. Just to reiterate, the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus has a Snapdragon 835 processor with an Adreno 540 GPU and 4 gigs of RAM. It is a total of 8 cores. The LG G6 on the other hand has a Snapdragon 821 processor with an Adreno 530 GPU with 4 gigs of RAM and is 4 cores. The first test I did was Geekbench, where the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus did 1847 in single core and 6222 for multi-core. The LG G6 on the other hand did 1828 when it came to single core and 4073 when it came to multi-core. The NT2 benchmark saw the S8 score 164,680, whereas the LG G6 scored 126,000 or so. Lastly, for a graphics benchmark with 3D Mark, the LG G6 scored 1788, where the Samsung Galaxy S8 did 3407. I also decided to do a test of the browser using SunSpider, where the lower the score the better, where the Samsung Galaxy S8 did 398 milliseconds in the test compared to 594 on the LG G6. When it came to the comparison of opening up a web page and an article like you would do in a real life situation, the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus was a little bit faster, but by no means was the LG G6 slow. But we've been here for a while now, and it's time to just wrap everything up. So when it comes to design, it's without a doubt that the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus is the better looking phone. It's a work of art, and it's what Samsung has been known for in the past few years, whereas LG is going with a simpler and more conventional design as we've seen them do before in the G5 and the G4. The button placement is better and the phone feels great in the hand, and if you're someone who does not like the curved screen whatsoever, the LG G6 solves that problem right there. It's a flat version and only comes in that one model. The bezels are almost non-existent, and I really like the way that both phones have taken advantage of their form factor. Software is rather subjective based on personal preferences, and you also have the option to fully customize the experience with launchers on both options, so I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. The Samsung Galaxy S8 definitely takes the cake for the camera in my opinion, but if 125-degree wide angle is super important to you, then you're only going to get that on the LG G6. Battery life was also noticeably better on the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus, despite it only being a few hundred milliamp hours larger. It's also worth mentioning that the LG G6 comes in at a lower price even compared to the standard size Samsung Galaxy S8, and they've taken a much more practical and utilitarian approach as opposed to a very futuristic approach that Samsung has taken with the S8 and S8 Plus and its features. Both phones are very solid in my opinion, but I think it comes down to two major things in deciding: the display, whether you like a curved or a flat, the screen size, as the Samsung Galaxy S8 is offered in two different models, whereas the LG G6 is only offered in the 5.7-inch option, and also the wide-angle camera on the LG if that is really important to you. But please leave a like on this video as it took a lot of time to produce, and if you watched all the way to the end, drop a comment down below as to which one you prefer, as I'd love to hear it, and also ask me any questions as I'd be happy to assist you in deciding which one to get, as I have both phones in front of me. I'll also be linking my full comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus and the Apple iPhone 7 Plus if you would like to check that out as well, but otherwise I'll see you all in the next video.